It's good to be here. Let me go ahead and turn my phone off. Today's topic is we are talking about catching coyotes in numbers. Um, if you have any comments or questions, be glad to cover them here. I can see them. I don't think you can, but so everybody probably steps into a season with some type of a goal. Which, whether you want to catch 10 coyotes or 20 coyotes, guys who have caught big numbers in the past, they kind of have it figured out a little bit. But there's a lot of guys that you caught your first 10 coyotes and then you want to catch 25 coyotes, or maybe you just want to jump to 100 coyotes. That's some of the avenues that guys want to go down. It's up to the individual. It's up to you, and it isn't necessarily just this isn't exactly with the same as or anything different than raccoons or fox or what have you. Having coyotes takes time, or catching coyotes takes time. Catching fox takes time, and it takes planning. Let's go ahead and look up some of the things I've thought about here. And putting up coyotes in numbers, I really believe that a person needs to understand coyote travel and how they move through the country, understand where they want to go. That's more important than anything, is where do they want to go. It also takes some planning to catch numbers, to catch a number of coyotes. And the last thing is there a cheat code? There certainly is in some cases in certain situations. As an example, the cheat code being is if you lined up 100 dead pits, feedlots, and things like that. Those will definitely speed up your numbers in a much faster scenario. We get into coyote travel, and the big thing for trappers is to make sure you understand how they move, as I got in this example where I'm showing the drainage, and this is a plat book. And for those of you, gazettes also have features such as this, but maps of your area is very important. In my mind, you go ahead and set yourself up for success by just going to areas to where the coyotes want to travel. Out west, there is areas such as this that this happens to be an area called Toy Canyon, and obviously we want to cover, get some traps lined up in the bottom of the canyon. You don't necessarily have to go all through the whole thing, but we can catch parts of it as we can travel to it quickly and easily. Going back to the quickly and easily, that makes a big difference when it comes to putting up numbers. If your route happens to be in an area that, as an example, my Flint Hills trap line, to cover one of my pastures on the ATV is going to be about 3 hours. If I'm in farm ground such as Illinois or Western Kansas or Central Kansas or whatever, where it's easy for me to slip in and slip out and slip in and slip out, that has a total different. I can get on a lot of properties being plural, being important. I can cover more ground and get on more family groups easier with a close. You just pull off the road into the farm field, you set the fence, turn around, go to the next fence, and so on and so forth. So those are obviously different than something. Good morning, buddy. But it's obviously more different when you are on Trapper Bob, is this coming in loud and clear? Just to let me know. Make sure we're not buffering. But looking at Toy Canyon, we definitely want to trap in that draw. We want to look at the features such as the pullouts where the coyotes could potentially leave the bottom of the trails. So when we're in this scenario, there's obvious places like that. Less obvious locations to catch coyotes would be smaller drainages. Here I catch a nice double, but the drainages, just like I'm showing in this plat book here, is hello, Steve. The plat book shows how they travel. Very good there, Bob. It shows their travel. Well, this is exactly what I was in. These are one of those fingers that come out of the draw. This is one scenario of how coyotes travel. Now, that's why I pay so much attention to where do the coyotes go. Then we get into areas like this where we have a draw on the back side. It's very subtle, but it's an obvious change. This is a coyote caught on a trail set leading down. I really got about 2 or 3 things happening here. I got a stock tank right behind me. I have YouTube videos of this location. Just looks a little different from the angle. But we have a nice fence line. We have trails leading to it. Definitely, I could set a couple sets here, and then I could also catch them down by that draw further down. Let's get into another scenario in rough country, and this is another rough country. These are all opportunities. That's what they are. We are understanding coyote travel. We want to get sets in, and we need to move on to the next feature, whether we're talking feature like this or features like this. We got to go with what they have, and this is another example of just getting a set in these locations. Now, we get into the farmland type country, and for a lot of guys, we have a total different environment. You can see the pastures in the far background. So those tough big hills back there, they are going to look a lot like that, and they're going to look like that. That's what that is. But then all of a sudden you pop out from catching numbers. Then we're looking at crop changes. This is becoming the new Midwest. We leave the corner post in from a surveyor standpoint for land ownership and that type of a thing. I do got to laugh. It's funny how the farm, it looks like they kind of curved out to avoid the post, but then they swoop back in. But crop edges, we have some cane to the left, we have some winter wheat to the right, and behind me is a cornfield. So we have multiple opportunities. I'm going to say that as a general rule, I can probably catch more coyotes in a day in this type of country, just like this one here, where we're talking about where obvious places are that coyotes are going to travel. These kind of locations are easily accessible, and I tell guys, my students, and I'm going to go back up where you guys can see me. I tell my students that the secret to getting a coyote is just about every coyote, or just about every fence line, will probably have one canine running it. Whether it's a fox, if you're in Pennsylvania, Delaware, or you're a coyote in Kansas or South Dakota. Eventually, I'm going to probably catch a coyote on a fence line. The secret for me to catching numbers is how many fence lines can I get on. And the secret to get to 100 is 99 more fence lines. Now that's overstating, that's oversimplifying the process, but I'm pretty close to saying that. I could get on one feedlot, and I have been on a feedlot and caught 100 coyotes in a 3-week period. It didn't happen all in a week, but I was catching some big numbers up front. So that would be what I call a cheat code to the process. But going back to our fence lines, I am in a waterway that I could drive up through right here on the edge of the field. And I'll say this is I can cover a lot more ground on this type of country than I can in this type of country. Here I'm bouncing. I'm having to unload an ATV if I really want to get down to these locations. I get in this type of a location and I can jump out, put in 1 or 2 sets, and go. There is a field behind me, but I want to add that one of my favorite locations on the trap line is about halfway down the field. The field behind me is equally as long as it is behind me. I think the advantages to sets like this is we have the coyote focused on going to that hedge road down at the end of the road, or wherever he's going. He's coming right by my set. So how many can I catch there? Well, maybe not a lot. Maybe just 1 or 2, but I can catch 1 or 2, and then I need to move on. We get into my even a better scenario is farm ground that's next to some type of CRP or something like that. We can probably put more traps. I did have a triple at this location with 2 sets that are actually behind me. But when we start looking at ground in the terms of how many traps do I want to put on it, I am very much interested in locations that have this thick brush, that have the tall grass. I am going to catch more coyotes because I tell you, the dog hunters will drop their dogs off in areas that's nice and thick, just like this. Coyotes are probably sitting there, laying there, watching me put my traps in or listen to my truck as I drive in and that type of thing. Coyotes are going to be in this type of in this type of an area, and this is a short clip talk or discussion, but this is a one statement I wanted to make clear. How I trap in most farmland scenarios is I try to limit trap flooding. 1 or 2 traps per edge. I want to cover this edge. I want to cover the edge underneath of the letter M in limit. I mean, that type of a thing. And I need to just move on unless I see a ton of sign. This winter wheat stalk here on this side of the coyote. Now that would be, we're getting back into that family group of, well, it's almost like CRP, isn't it? So we might want to flood a few more traps along this particular edge. But in coyote trapping, for me, edges are 99% of it. And then when you're in the farm country, then I'm wanting to look at, I want to look at areas like this to get more. Now I have to get into my flooding. Now I'm already into the pasture, so let me get around this. And typically in this type of a ground here is I'll run the perimeter. There is a fence behind me, but this draw would be how coyotes would probably travel through this type of a grassland. It's a road map. You have a fence, so I'm literally just inches away from the fence when I took this photograph. So I'm actually catching coyotes that may want to run the fence, and I'm covering coyotes that's running the ditch. That's what this kind of information tells me when I'm in it. We could eat, we all want to go ahead and just pop our sets in quickly, and we want to find locations like this. But when we get into a different country, then we have to do a little bit different. If I'm gonna drive into this Toy Canyon up in Wyoming, I'm certainly not going to waste my time just checking one trap. I need more traps to cover this, and I'm going to cover some of these draws that pop out of the canyon. So unless you guys have any questions for me, this is what I wanted to talk about. For me, the secrets to catching numbers of coyotes is getting as many traps on as much ground as I can. I'll say this, in a typical scenario such as this farm field, we're probably looking at a section of ground, so we're looking at 640 acres. I can get 4 or 5 traps on this whole ground and then get out of there. Go on to the next property, move on down the road. We go, the more, if we look at this road here that runs, it says Town Site Road, that's on the right of center. I want to pop out, get some sets in, pop out, get some sets in on each one of those sections, and keep moving. But we can't do that if the ground looks like this. We have to spend more time. How you doing, Ottercat? We have to spend more time on it. So, folks, that's kind of my 2 cents on putting up numbers, is for you to kind of travel fast, set fairly light when you're in farm country. If I was in eastern Illinois, western Indiana, in that prime farm ground type of a country, I might even flirt with the idea of pulling my trap as soon as I catch a coyote. It just doesn't have a lot of ground that's going to hold coyotes. When you got something, we'll get back to this here. When I have ground like this, I can set it. When I have ground like this, how many coyotes can be supported on this type of ground? It's more of a travel way, and just I call them like a scout, where the coyotes are just scouting the area, just seeing, hey, if there's some pheasants that's moved in, or some quail or things like that, but they're not staying. So let the terrain tell you where to go. Set as many fence line edges as you can run. I generally run around 125, 150 traps, depending on the ground that I'm currently on, and you want to cover. And I would love to have one trap on 100 fence lines. I mean, in all fairness, I can catch a lot of coyotes in a day very quickly. Now, I don't know when the coyotes are going to move back in, but for trappers that are thinking about numbers, there's never too much land. The same thing would apply with raccoons. Mike, the same thing applies with raccoons. The same thing applies with fox. The only thing that might make a difference is the type of terrain you have. You could be on a travel way. When I caught my 86 coyotes off of 640 acres, where I wrote the book 1 Square Mile, that was a special location, and I trapped it over a 6-week period. So every day I had to go in there for six solid weeks and keep checking that, but I was always rewarded with more. When you get into your farmland country, I'm not going to sit there for 6 weeks. I probably need to move in about 7 to 10 days. The further, if I was maybe up in the Dakotas, I probably need to be there at least 2 weeks, because those coyotes happen to not come back as often. They might be running a much bigger territory. Let's see here. Do you use the long running barriers like the bigger creeks and rivers? I do. I'll set those up there. All of that type of terrain. I'm going to go back up to my obvious. I don't really have a good river photo here, but I don't really have a river photo for you. Hey, John, glad to have you. I really don't have a river type of a scenario. John, I think you'll remember this location. This was a spot that John and we caught a double on this particular day. Not that day, but at that location. This is a different coyote. But anyway, I set up the barriers. I set up more importantly, let's go back, and if we're talking creeks or rivers, less obvious. This could easily be a waterway going into a cornfield. Whenever you have something like this that would create a travel with the fence behind me, we want to set the fence. We also want to set the waterway going through the cornfield. We can do those types of sets. So catching coyotes in numbers, it takes planning. It takes having ground that we can get on. I would say this, having 20 sections of ground would be a good starting point for getting big numbers. Having ground, just put yourself on as much ground as you can. The next thing I will say for most scenarios is 3 weeks in an area, you pretty much taken the cream. If you want numbers, I remember the year that Richard and I caught 460 coyotes. That year, we were in 3 different states, and we were there about 2 to 3 weeks, 3 weeks at each location. And so we started out at the end of October, 1st of November up in the Dakotas. We got to Kansas and we hit our 403rd coyote in Kansas, and then we got down into New Mexico and we caught our final 60. I just think that 3 weeks is about as long as you can handle an area. You'll get more ground in an area, but your other trap line is pretty much dead. That's kind of the thing. So we move every 7 to 10 days, and every day you want to put out more sets. Every day to get catchy numbers is you need to get more sets in the ground. Good morning. What about fence rows bordered by timber? I think they would be good. Fence rows and timber are very good. They all have the thing about the timber and the edge of the like a lot of Midwestern farm fields have a timber, rough ground, rivers, Missouri, Illinois, things like that. I'm going to say this, Bushman, that you also get into your non-targets. You get into more of your possums and more of your raccoons and things like that. This picture here, where I have a coyote, let's see here, a fence line. To the right of this fence line and down 200 acres down the edge is a very good waterway. Now that's where I actually go to trap bobcats once we get into December. So I'm avoiding that. I'm avoiding that location, especially at the beginning of the year. Though if you get into the real freezing temperatures and things like that, when the possums are a little bit less active and that type of thing, and hopefully the coyotes den up, or not the coyotes, but the raccoons den up a little bit. Those are good. Anyway, get on as much ground that you can be on in a single day, spreading yourself out as thin as you can to some degree within reason. When I did trap locally here and I was going at it, I caught 340 coyotes in a season. I actually had a northern line. I had and this is for a guy who wanted to trap the entire season. We had a decent fur market for coyotes, but I would trap the northern line for 3 weeks. I would trap my central line for 3 weeks, and I had a southern line for 3 weeks. And I had a bonus there. My feedlots were on the southern line. So those are all, that's kind of my strategy. 3 weeks move, 3 weeks move, 3 weeks move. One thing that I see with some of my students, and this is not a slam on them, it's them just going to the next level, is coyotes happen to, or guys will go on their trap line when I'm visiting them, and we're out setting traps or we're talking location, and we're done by 1 o'clock. They've run out of ground. If you can get your line out in 1 day, 2 days, and you have your entire line out, and you want numbers. Now that's the point. And you want numbers. Then you need to then you need more ground. So what would I do if I had a full-time job like I did? I actually had an opportunity to where I worked a second shift, and I had 3 hours that I could run the line, get home, skin the coyotes, do what I needed to do before work. I would say this to you who want numbers that can't set 15 traps every day. For those of you, I would say every Saturday you need to be on a new property. Every Saturday you need to move. Maybe your very first set you give it 2 weeks, but then on Friday you need to think about start pulling your sets. So Saturday you can finish pulling and you start setting on another property altogether. I think that's important, is to get moving on. Bob, as far as saturation goes, do you recommend more than one trap at a set? So it depends there, Bob. this set were down here where the coyote jump is, that was the only set at that location. That was it. On this edge. Then if you look over here at the cornfield side, I had another set a little further down so that the coyotes, for them traveling that way. A lot of times, I don't know how good of an area that I'm in when I first move into it. Now, next year, if I'm catching doubles and triples, and I mean, once I start catching every day, it's time for me to add more sets. But the first year, I don't know as much. The second year, you start pinpointing them. I would rather have one good set, and you guys have seen me on YouTube where I'm putting in trail sets and things like that. I like the trail set better than I do the dirt hole because I'm catching them right where they want to walk. Am I missing some? I probably am, the ones that aren't right where I'm at because my set's a little subtle. But I got to find out first whether I want to put in 2 or 3 or 4 sets. After I've learned, I've caught on this location and I like the location, maybe go and remake that set and then add a second set nearby. Now, I had a location. It was right along I-80 that out west, and that set had 2 sets at it for the entire 3 weeks I was there, and I never caught a single animal. The next year I went there, and I only put in 1 set. I liked the location. I was stubborn about it, but I will catch you here in a second, Otter. So I went with the 1 trap. And then, but that year was totally different. I ended up catching out of my 20 days there, I ended up catching 19 coyotes. 19. I couldn't believe it. I finally, after the 3rd coyote at that remake, I ended up putting in a second set, and I couldn't believe my luck. And then all of a sudden, I was really catching. I mean, every day I showed up, I knew I was going to catch a coyote there. It was unbelievable. I even added a 3rd set for whatever reason was avoided. I think that the catch circles, for whatever reason, those coyotes was attracted to that location, whereas up in Iowa, I couldn't catch a coyote in a remake. I got to a point in Iowa where I was actually pulling traps and just moving them because once I caught the set was done. So every area is a little bit different. Let's get here to Otter Cat. The reason I asked about the water is because I never seen water in your videos except when you were in Maine. Well, I have trapped a lot of water edges. I probably did less photography back in the days. It just happens to be the location where I'm at. And Patriot, I have 10 coyotes traveling together on one of my game cameras here in Vermont. Can I catch many coyotes in that same location? Let me say this to you, Patriot. And if your name's because of the New England Patriots, I'm happy. I only wish that the Chiefs could be playing Tom Brady again in the Super Bowl. We want some redemption there with Tom. But getting back to the 10 coyotes, if you know you have them, it's the same as a feedlot. Very much the same as a feedlot. If they're traveling together, there's a reason that they're moving through that spot. You might be on a great travel zone. I've argued the fact that if you understand how coyotes are traveling, and we'll go back to let's go back to this obvious toy canyon here. If I put a set and I put your 10 sets in the bottom of that draw, just using that as an example, and it just isn't in view, but let's say I keep on going around in the back of the mountain down there. And I had 10 sets and I caught 6 coyotes through the same canyon down in the draw. To me, that's still whatever. Is that a sextuplet? That's just, even though they're not in picture, I think it's still a sextuplet because we understand how they travel. I suggest another scenario would be a feedlot. We know they're going to the dead cows, whether they're rendered or going to a compost, but we know they're going to the dead. I can look at the dirt in our country. I can look at the dirt. I can see the coyotes are coming to this location. I can pick these coyotes up, but say you did have 10. Then in theory, if you really felt strong enough about it, I really suggest that your best opportunity is to flood that ground in that case, because you already know it. You have the game cameras. They're already telling you they're coming through here. Load it up. Load that kind of a spot up and just keep picking them off. Once a coyote has seen their buddies picked off, once they start seeing them get picked off and you're not in a feedlot scenario, I think you stand a chance of missing coyotes in the future because, well, they're coming in here and they've seen their buddies picked off. They can still smell the skunk where the coyote's caught. They can still smell the castry odors. They can still smell a lot of that that type of stuff. Let's not let them fool it. You know, when I was talking with Jason, and he got on a feedlot this year, and I told him when he got into it, I said, set the living shit out of it. Sorry, folks. But get 15, 20, 30 traps on a feedlot if you need to cover that. And not only focus on the dead pile, but focus on them coming in. O'Gorman was real big on snaring for me in one of those canyon types or draws, those coulees. Set as many as 30 snares in it. Drop them when they come in. When you have experience on a location and you understand your ground, load it up. Let's get to some questions here. If Ottercat says if they're traveling together, get what you can at once, but the others will be very hard to catch at the same spot. I couldn't agree more. Another thing I'm going to add say that somebody drug out a dead cow for you, or you showed up and there was a fresh dead cow on that dead one. I see guys who like putting traps around the dead cow. They're legal. They're in a state where it's legal. That being said, I hate putting traps around the individual dead. That's not a feedlot scenario. I prefer to catch them coming to the dead a little distance away. And Patriot says, thanks. Yes, we like Brady out east. That's a good one. But going back to the dead, I don't make that the enemy. You know they're coming to it. Offer some fresh sets along their travel way. I also have seen in New Mexico, as an example, when coyotes are on the juniper berries. Catching those coyotes when they're on the junipers, it's funny how all of a sudden conditions change and they're not as interested in tainted meats or things along that line. I get better at catching them in trail sets in that kind of a case. So, guys, I had a lot of fun doing this topic. I'm sorry that the prices are as low as they are. I certainly didn't go after the coyotes this year. I enjoyed myself, knocked off some bucket list items, but the secret to numbers is get yourself on as many fence lines, on as many edges as you can. When you know you have a good location, such as that center pivot shot, make sure you set those areas up heavier. If you have experience there, well, put 4 traps, 5 traps if you know it. Steve says, is one set better than another? Flat sets, step down. I've heard beaver oil is good for coyote sets. What's your thoughts? Beaver oil is a great lure. It's a choice. It adds curiosity. It can create a digging reaction. There's some advantages to using odors that are in that family group. Is one set better? I do dirt hole sets when I like the location, but I'm not finding sign. I do flat sets when I have sign. I think it's crazy. I even had a comment by a guy on this one location in a video, and if I'm talking to you, wonderful. But he said you could catch a coyote at that location with any set. Well, my argument there is if I got their tracks, I don't need to put another set in. I mean, let's catch him right where he's walking. The young Ed Schneider would have put a dirt hole in off of the track. I would have gone off the track. I would have looked for the proper guiding and things like that. I say that if you have tracks, set the tracks. Set the tracks. If you can tell where he's walking, that's, I guess, why I like when I'm coming down the edge of the field. And we'll go back here to the coyote jumping. I got him walking down this edge. I have the coyote focused in. He's given me the tracks, and I could walk right on down and put in more tracks in that location. Let's see. Patriot says, I'll be stocking up on my lures. Thanks for all your back. Thank you very much, Patriot. I appreciate that for the sales pitch. Set those set those types of spots when you have them. We all have different circumstances. We all have different locations, whether you're in the timber as John is, or whether you're in the farmlands of the plains or what have you. But I think more than anything, to get numbers, set as many as you can handle. I'd rather be on more coyotes in a day than I would to put all my eggs in one basket. When I am in the Flint Hills right here, I'm on only one family group, more or less, maybe two. But the best day I ever had on one property was 13 coyotes. That was a freak. That was just a high population here. So thanks a lot for tuning in, guys. I'm going to let you go. I think I kind of drugged this one to death. I'll add one more thing. If you have a job after 2 weeks, move traps to a new location. If you're done by noon or if you have time to spare when you're checking your traps, you don't have enough ground yet. Try to really pack in your numbers or a number of traps you're going to check while you have time. If you're on your way to work or whatever, don't be catching yourself to where you're just lollygagging around and saying, well, I don't know why I'm not getting 50 coyotes out of this one location. Think about spreading yourself out. Get yourself on as many coyotes, and you're going to have less goose egg type of days. Thanks a lot, guys.